Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. I'm your host, Joy Ravella. I really do hope you've been enjoying these podcast episodes, and if there's ever been a particular one that's resonated with you, or maybe a topic you want to hear more about, or a guest whose story you just want to dive a bit deeper on, I would love to hear your feedback. At the end of the day, this podcast is set up so that you can grow in your faith as together we unpack a verse day by day using the same three questions. First impressions of the verse, what this verse tells us about God, and lastly, how this verse has shown up in our own lives. That's the format of the Everyday Joy podcast, just in case you haven't had a chance to listen to the first episode where I set it all up. Right now, though, let's get into today's Bible verse.
Now listen, today I'm giving you a choice between life and death, between prosperity and disaster. That's found in Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 15 in the New Living Translation.
Once again, Jo Chapman here in studio with me.
So
Jo,
excited to be here, Joy. I get more out of it, I think, than you realise. I feel like I'm receiving when I'm with you. I'm blessed.
Oh, thank you. Well, I honestly really am enjoying the conversations we've been having this week. I feel like it's got a beautiful flow to it. And months ago, when we were first starting conversations around this podcast, you said to me that there was one particular verse that really, like, if you ever got that verse, or if you could ever pick one verse, you'd put your name next to that one. And it was a verse, it's this one here. I'm giving you a choice between life and death in Deuteronomy chapter 30 verse 15. And you might recall yesterday with episode 61, we picked a verse that was a little bit earlier on in the chapter, Deuteronomy 30 verse 3, and go back and listen to that one to get the most out of today's episode. But a quick recap, yesterday's episode was all about restoration and how that can look differently to us. Today, we're taking a look at the choice that we have, that God does his bit with restoration, but we've got a choice, we've got a responsibility and a part to play as well. Jo, what are your first impressions of this verse?
Well, going back to that other verse, sometimes God needs to restore things because of the choices we've made between life and death. And so I love this verse. I absolutely, it resonates so much with me. And I think what it speaks to me is that sometimes we think of life and death as literal life, death. I better not jump off that building because I'm going to choose death. But there is life and death in every single decision that we make.
That is true. Every decision takes you down a path.
Every decision either brings life to your bones, life to your spirit, life to your heart, or can bring destruction, can bring death, can bring a diminishing of joy, a diminishing, a dying to hope. So every decision is, nothing is just stagnant. We are building life or we're building death in the way that we choose, and it's not physical. Although if you jump off a building, it is. That's your final decision.
Yeah.
But in every small way, are we adding life or are we adding a death response? And that's the power of this scripture to me. I find it exciting, fascinating. Also comes back to episode 59 and 60 about the words we speak. Are they speaking life? Are they speaking death? It's an everyday, all the time decision. And I personally find it confronting but powerful because it's easy to ask the question, is this bringing me life or is this bringing me death?
Yeah. And when I think you put your decisions through that filter, I suppose it makes you think carefully about the choice you'll make next. I did a quick Google about it, and apparently every day we make about 35,000 choices.
Wow.
35,000, which makes sense because you're getting out of bed and you're like, should I put my socks on? Should I not? Okay. You just kind of, you make all those sorts of choices.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all on the scale, I think. I think there's a spectrum. Some decisions really carry a lot of weight, and some of them are like what you're going to wear to work today. Yeah, they're not so much life and death, but they do have an impact. They do have a consequence. What are your thoughts around what this verse tells you about who God is or what matters to him?
Well, the verse starts with, now listen. So I would say this is important to God because he gives that, that arrest at the start of the scripture to say, this is important basically. Now listen. And it says, today I'm giving you the choice between life and death. So this is a today and in the present moment. It's not, doesn't give it to you once a year. It's not a decision that you make, marriage once or twice. It's not a decision that you make randomly. It's an everyday today decision. And I think he's very present. He's very present. Opportunity is all around us. And he doesn't make the decisions for us. He is saying it's about today. He's saying, I give you choices. And he's saying that, you have the power to make choices. We're not robotic. You have the choice to have life or death. And God is very, very present. I always think to myself, every day has 24 hours. And I wonder, what does this day look like? Be childlike. What does it look like? You've got 24 hours. Think about the decisions you make and really make the best ones.
Yeah. That's such a great outlook. And I think it reflects your personality as well, because you're like a go-get-him kind of gal. For me, I think my first impression when I look at this verse, it actually makes me a little nervous, because I'm so terrified of making the wrong decision. I'm often the kind of person who will sit on something for such a long time because I don't want to offend someone. I don't want to burn a bridge. I don't want to let down someone. That's like my absolute worst fear. If you know anything about the Enneagrams, I'm like a hardcore type 3 whose worst fear is people's perception of them. And so for me, when I see this verse, I think to myself, wow, God must really value my own decision-making process for him to give me the choice. And maybe I got to have a little bit more faith in myself. Maybe I need to, trust and believe in God and acknowledge his wisdom, but also maybe I just need to say, okay, I'm going to make a choice, like take the reins a little bit more. I hear you, and I love what you're saying, and I think that's a common thing. People are frightened of making the wrong decision. Absolutely, and I've been in that position many times. I think as I've got older, I realise it's a bit like going back to the podcast yesterday. We said in episode 61, God puts back the pieces. So he's with you. He's looking after you. We make a wrong decision, you've got an opportunity to correct it, and God restores. So the fear factor, you're not standing alone, you're not making decisions alone. God is there to redirect. It's a bit like the navigator on your car. You make a wrong turn, it reroutes and says, okay, you reroute. You know what you've done? You've taken extra time to get there, but you'll still get there. So God is the ultimate rerouter. He finds that you've gone in the wrong direction and he'll prompt you back to the right direction. But I think when you have that battle about, am I going to make the wrong decision? Am I going to, I don't want to do the wrong thing. Apply this choice between life and death. And I'll tell you a weakness of mine. I can be quite flighty when I'm passionate about something. I can shoot off that email to someone really quickly. Blah, 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 blah. Now I need to say, is that going to bring a life response to both me and the person and a positive life change, or is it going to bring death? Now, sometimes that correction isn't necessarily bad. I've got to put it through the filter of it's going to bring about a good result. Yeah. It's going to help both that person and me. But if I am just saying something to hurt, it's going to bring death and pain to that person, ultimately going to ruin a relationship and not bring about anything. That's a death response. So is this, and that means not physical death, but think of it in progression and destruction. What adds to me is life. What takes away from me is death. When you have to make a big decision, yes, you can have that fear of doing the wrong thing. But God is right beside you, picking up those pieces, as episode 61 said, surrounding you with his love. And like the car navigator will reroute if you take a wrong turn, God reroutes you. He'll help you get there. It's a bit like taking a longer time, another trip around the mountain, so to speak. But God is there. But to actually have the faith to just put into practice, does this decision advance me, bring me joy? Does it have life qualities where it raises me up and others, where it has potential to grow me and advance me? Or does it bring me stress? Does it bring me destruction? Does it take away from me? Does it diminish a relationship? These are the life and death decisions that we make. Now, I guess in summary, to anybody listening right now, this was the verse.
Today I'm giving you a choice between life and death, between prosperity and disaster. So right today, as you listen to this and you're thinking about the decisions that you have to make, you bring life and death to yourself through the decisions, through the process. You have the power to add to your life joy, peace, hope. You have the power to make a decision to bring Jesus into your decision. Each decision, of course, carries certain consequences with you, both good and bad. Let your decisions today bring you life. God is right next to you, partnering with you. And if you make a wrong decision, don't worry. He'll reroute. You will end up with a decision as you partner with God. And the adventure is learning to hear, learning to bring life, learning to add to yourself that which God has always destined for you.
As you head towards making your next decision, I hope that today's conversation encourages you to choose life. I love what Jo said a little bit earlier, where she kind of broke down the idea of life, not just meaning literal life, but things that add to your life, things that bring joy and peace and comfort and a sense of being right with God. All of these things can help us determine whether the decision we're making is heading towards the life direction. I also want to take a moment to touch on the fact that sometimes we don't know. We're only human, and it can be really hard for us to know whether the right thing to do is to go this way or go the other way. That's when we need to acknowledge that God is God. And at the end of the day, no matter how much we mess up or how much we want to do the right thing and things still don't turn out the best way, God is an expert at re-navigating us. He is an expert at helping us get back on track. So whatever decision you've got to make today, I hope you can choose life, and I hope that you can trust that God is powerful enough to speak to you, to divert you, or push you ahead in the right direction. That wraps up today's episode on the Everyday Joy podcast. Look forward to catching up tomorrow.